Welcome to Brightly You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we use our good and bad experiences, friendship, and passions to inspire thought provoking conversation and soul driven advice to better help you create a life worth living and step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy. I think, were you supposed to read that or was I supposed to read that?
No, I think you were.
Okay.
Last week I had quite the cold open, so I, I figured someone else should break up the
Thank
tone
you.
of my
I thought
my
I
voice.
was supposed to, but and speaking of last week, I
It
this
was
is
heavy.
well, it was heavy, but it was also good and necessary, and I've gotten a lot of feedback
Oh,
around it.
wow.
Yes, I have. I've heard from a few people that it was very moving and that they're so happy, that you're doing well and that it seems to have been a success. But also, that's a tough act to follow, Tracy.
You're telling me that this entire time I've had all year when this seemed like that resolution was coming, I had two tracks of mind. Well, technically three. One, it's not going to work, right? We
Yeah.
don't have to think about that anymore. That didn't happen. But so in I had one mindset of just like, we just got to get to the surgery and then the surgery will be successful. But as I got closer and closer to that, it was then paralleled with the thought of what's next? If, like, what, especially if this goes well, what's next? This has been such a huge driver of your decision making, of your abilities, capabilities, and whatnot. And so I loved that this next
Well,
topic is following it because I need that.
listen, as you were just talking right now, I'm like, oh my God, this has been your purpose for so long,
Yeah.
right? It's been
Yes.
your purpose. And so, spoiler alert, that's what we're going to be talking about today is purpose. And there was a part of me that was just like, who wants to hear about purpose? Purpose schmurpus. Let's get back to like, how's Tracy doing? But I think that this might actually be good because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there for whatever reason, whether kids are grown, don't have any kids, a new job, left a job, a new relationship, left a relationship. Like, what is next? And I,
Gone
yeah,
are the days of those three boxes of life, as Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color is Your Parachute, kind of talks about, right? Where you kind of have like your childhood and your young adulthood, and then you go to college and you get married and you have your job, and then you retire and go off into the sunset, right? And so, like, there's always been this idea of you have this kind of one main act of life. I've never had that though. And there's a lot of people in my life where they're starting to pick an entirely new career at 40. Like there's another podcast that I just discovered kind of dedicated to second acts and how people were a mechanic from high school until 40 and then went to medical school and now they're an MD. Or the vice versa, that they did one other
isn't
professional
that
career
fabulous?
and then
Yeah,
now they're a certified mechanic at 45. And
yeah.
I think we have so many more opportunities in front of us for education, for job hopping, and for, people are really ready to stand up and say, I'm not meant for only one thing in life, right? That I have many facets of me. And we've talked
Yeah.
about that before, that you're never starting over, you're starting from experience. Um, but at the same time, like you just said, like my purpose for so long has been to figure this out, right? That it's really been kind of me centered. And then, someone recently, shared with me, I was like, oh, this has been the year of pain. This has been the year of like recuperating. And they're like, no, it's been the year of healing. And I was like, well, that's really nice of you. Maybe it's both. But then recently, I just had a conversation with someone at the clinic who asked if they're going to write a paper about it. And they might. And so now I'm trying to rebrand the past 15 years as my purpose was shedding light on this, right? Not just finding results for me, but other people. but they're
Okay, I feel like that opens up a whole nother, I don't want to say I don't want any bad analogy, but it opens up a different aspect on purpose that can you look back and go, oh, I see now what my purpose was then. And that sheds a new light on it so that instead of you going, I struggled and was challenged, but now you can say, I did all those things and it was for this great resolution.
And I think kind of like what we'll be talking about later in the year with like coming up with a word of the year, not only for the year that's approaching, but reflecting on the year you just had and like what did it actually end up being and kind of
Mhm.
summarizing it that. I think that's a great thing you can do, especially if you're struggling with what is your purpose now, is to kind of reflect back on what your prior purposes have been. But that doesn't change the fact that I feel like I have a blank canvas in front of me because I don't want it to be about that moving forward. I don't want to be an
Right.
endometriosis advocate or champion as a
Yeah.
career, right? Like I don't want this to be my life anymore. I want something new, but it's so broad and open that I am very overwhelmed.
Right. So that was my next question. Like, is this blank canvas for you? Is it exciting or is it overwhelming? And you did say you're overwhelmed, but are you a tiny bit excited to be like, oh, the
Oh
world
yeah,
is my big oyster on a half shell, even though.
there's definitely seeing it as an opportunity, right? So it goes back to mindset, right? If you're not sure what
Mhm.
your purpose is, it's, well, you have many, your purpose is discovering your purpose, right? Like, and how freeing and fun is that? But you've been doing some work on of your own on this, haven't you?
Well, I did a little teeny tiny bit. I had great expectations of doing work on this, and even signed up for. I do a lot of these workshops through Kathy Heller. If you don't know who she is, she's a podcaster and author. Um, she does a lot of workshops and one-on-one work and things like that. She wrote the book Don't Keep Your Day Job. So it's kind of the same kind of thing. She interviewed many people who were doing, something their entire life or whatever, and then decided, I really like baking cookies. I'm going
Yeah.
to open a cookie store, and so she literally has interviewed many people. She's doing much more kind of spiritual mindset work now, but she had this like 5-day workshop on find your purpose, and I thought, what fun! I should try it, and except my life was apparently already so purposeful, I only got to one of them. Um,
Well, tell us about the
but
one.
yeah, no, it was super interesting. She is very inspiring, has great stories. And one of the things that she talks about is living on someone else's terms and not your own. And you and I have talked about this before. Like, whose goal is it, right? Is it ours? Is it our families? Is it somebody else who said, oh, you'd love this, you'd be great at this? Um, and then, I think one of the things with purpose, not that she said this, but I think sometimes there's purpose with a capital P,
Mm.
and then there's just like different purposes, right? But sometimes I think, like, I feel like I used to think I am destined for a great purpose. Like, and I was probably 11 or, some dramatic age, when you're just full of drama. Um, and I don't know how old I was when I went, maybe not, like,
Well,
maybe
but who
not.
defines great, right? Like
Thank you.
there's
Thank you for that. And that is actually a key element of our whole conversation, is who determines what is a great purpose
because
and
I
what
think what
changes the world. Yeah.
well, okay, see, changes the world. So I think that's what becomes overwhelming to me when I think about purpose is uh it for like the entire decade of my 20s and maybe a little bit of my early 30s, I equated purpose with what am I helping someone else achieve, right? Like it was very externally driven. And now as I approach my 40s, I'm like, well, my purpose can be about me.
Absolutely it can. Absolutely it
And it can
can.
still help people, but the primary thing, it doesn't have to be I went out and started a nonprofit, right?
Right.
Like the Powerball was really big a decade ago, and I know that's like every 6 months now, but we had this whiteboard in the office, kind of like what coffee shops do, and somebody asked, what would you do if you won the lottery? And there were like 10 of 20 people who said that they would start a nonprofit. And I was just like, I wouldn't do that. I have no experience in nonprofits. I just have money. I guarantee you there are already nonprofits and other great organizations out there doing the things I want to do. Why compete with them? Why not just flood them with cash, right? Like, why do I have to be involved? At this point, I'm just the person with the money. And so many of them were like, oh, but wouldn't you want to do the work? And I was like, well, I could still volunteer, but like, I don't think it's my purpose to create this new thing
No,
that
it was their purpose.
it was
It
their
was the
purpose.
purpose they wanted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was also like looking at them like, but why aren't you doing that now? You could work at a nonprofit now and make what you're making, right? Like, why does it take winning the lottery and starting it? Like, clearly you want some sort of ownership of it. Clearly you want to have
Such
a
a
business, you want
good,
to be in charge.
well, and I think that, so I've got two thoughts on that. One is we want it to be that huge impact, right? There's a huge impact, but also, oh, it might have flitted in and flitted out. Let's see if I can recall it. Also, I think, yes, we want it to be the grand thing. And we don't think that the smaller things, like you just said, but you could do something right now as a nonprofit. I remember thinking that I used to want to start a nonprofit. I had a name for it. I knew what I wanted to do in it. I wanted to be all about art, and I wanted it to coincide with addiction recovery, and a place where people could just walk in and do art, right? Like, I don't know how that would look, and I was like, that would be, lots of money and this and that. And somebody else said something like, but you could start something online where you talk about it. It was probably you, Tracy. But anyways, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I could. But that didn't seem like interesting or big enough or whatever. And so I can face that like maybe I wanted some of the glory of like opening up this brick and mortar shop. But also it might be too that we only want to do if it'll be easy and the money makes it easy.
Money does make it easy, but I think there's this quiet part that I think I'm starting to say out loud as I get older, where I'm just saying like I want it to be about me, where I think a lot of people equate that capital P purpose with the leader of the organization and therefore themselves.
Yes.
Right? That
Yes.
when you think of innovation, when you think of purpose, and you think of like the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and like
Mm-hmm.
all these big names, and they're in charge, and they get to, people who are leading a purpose driven life, they get to make their own decisions, and they're not held down by other people. I mean, not that those people don't have responsibilities or things that they're tied to, but they can change the course of the ship at any
Yeah.
time that it kind of feels like their purpose has changed or the business's
Yeah.
purpose has changed. And I think that's where that lowercase purpose comes in, that people, like you said, it's a little bit more work when you're not, right? When you have to do it in addition to your day job, or when it's a volunteer gig and not something that you get to be the sole proprietor of.
Yeah.
And I think that's
So,
why it feels so overwhelming to think of purpose, is I don't want to run something that seems so.
right. Well, that's the whole thing. It's like, what is purpose? And one of the things that Kathy Heller brought up is this concept of ikigai. And I know you're familiar with it, but it's basically sort of, if you think of a Venn diagram with three circles that intersect, um, and actually this is four circles, but she did not talk about the fourth one, even though all of her stuff is how to get paid for it. But ikigai is the concept of something you love to do, something you're good at, something the world needs, and something you can be paid for. And then that it's that centerpiece. That is just like that would be your purpose.
And that's from Japanese culture.
That is Japanese culture, although that is somewhat westernized, I think. And then there's an even more westernized version of it that combines like, okay, what you love and what you're good at is your passion. What you love and what the world needs is your mission. What the world needs and what you can be paid for is your vocation. And what you are good at and what you can be paid for is your profession, which I'm not so sure about the vocation and profession. But what I do love is when I actually looked up Ikigai, the actual, the true Ikigai is thought to be more embracing the joy of little things, being in the here and now, reflecting on past happy memories, and having a frame of mind that one can build a happy and active life. I mean, that seems pretty sweet. And with that seems, I would like that to be my purpose.
I And this is what overwhelms me though, because what do you do? You know, like if you're in your early 20s, straight out of high school or in high school, and you're trying to figure out a major, a college, a future, I feel like some of these things are easy and maybe you have a lot of them, right? And so your problem is picking which one, right? Which one would I want to do for the longest or invest time and money in? But for me, as I approach 40, I'm a little apathetic. The things I'm good at, I don't want to do anymore. I want to discover new things I'm good at. The things that used to bring me joy don't always bring me joy anymore. And so it's like that whole idea of, especially in a post-pandemic world, like rediscovering yourself and having to go through that process before you can pick your purpose, right? Like I kind of want to put the cart in front of the horse and be like, no, this is my purpose and it will give me my joy. And you're saying, Tracy, you have to know what's going to bring you joy.
Oh, and I don't. I think it's wonderful. I actually think that's a great thing for you to go, but these things I no longer want to do.
Yeah.
And those things kind of bore me. You know, later this year we'll be doing a show on a yearly audit, and there's nothing that says you can't do a life audit, right? Or or any kind of audit. Like what does bring me joy these days? And I think a question that I want to ask, because I'm just going to say one more thing that Kathy Heller said, and then we can move on from there. But one of her things was like, oh, you have these limiting beliefs that keeps you from living your purpose. And
Mm.
I thought, what if it not only kept us, or these things maybe kept us from living our purpose, but what if we just tried to live on purpose, not our purpose, but just on purpose, and then see what happened with that. And by that, I'm just talking about like not letting the day take me away, but being more in charge of my day and more in the moment and reflecting and responding instead of reacting.
Yeah, because the true how did you pronounce it? Ikigai.
Ikigai.
The true ikigai that you mentioned, the embracing the joy of little things, being in the here and now, reflecting on the past happy moments and frame of mind that one can build a happy and active life. That really helps me in this because I feel like I'm doing that. And I'm like, oh, I am living a purpose driven life. Awesome. That's great. Whereas before I was like, oh, do you think maybe you're skirting on like mid level happiness because you're overwhelmed by identifying some of these things for like the fourth time in your life? Because as we've discussed,
Well,
we both have so many interests, right?
oh, yeah.
And so it's hard to narrow it down because you feel like you're picking something over something else. And at some point you do have to, or you're never going to finish anything.
Oh, yeah, I hear that. And I think that's also sometimes why, because maybe we're overwhelmed or we have so many interests. It's why so often you hear people saying, but what's my purpose? Asking the tarot reader, tell me what my purpose in life is, asking the medium, the psychic, like asking anyone but themselves. Like it truly like looking into themselves and just thinking, well, you know, what if this was my purpose? How would that feel? And maybe trying on a purpose. I don't know. I asked a question. Uh I didn't ask it because I haven't asked it yet. I'm going to ask it now. Do you find your purpose, or does your purpose find you?
I think it depends on how you're looking at it, right? Like we just at the start of the episode reframed the past 15 years of my life. It could have been, oh, this, disorder took my life from me, right? And like took
Yeah,
my money and took my time and I was in pain. And instead, I'm reflecting back and being like, oh, my purpose was to help shed light on this and to help the medical community understand it better and to be, as we discussed last time, a voice for people who couldn't or didn't have a voice in it, right? That for whatever reason I got this far. And so in that case, it found me, right? Like I didn't choose this, I didn't ask for it. I'd give it back if I could, even knowing it found me. But I can't do any of that. And so yeah, and reflecting back and be like, oh, some of my purposes have found me. I worked in the mental health profession for a while, and it was one of those things where it was something everybody told me I was good at. And so I did it for a while and I did feel purposeful and I did like it, but it also burnt me out and exhausted me because I didn't
I think,
have
yeah,
anything outside of it. And so that was another one that I feel like it was kind of a blend where it mostly found me. I mean, I was definitely making choices and trying to make it my purpose at a certain point.
yeah.
Um,
I want to dig into that a little bit. What if you what if you think you found your purpose and then all of a sudden you're burnt out by it, or something happens with it that it no longer feels like your purpose?
Well, think of how many educators out there
Yeah.
in the past 3 years, 10 years, right? With all of the things that are put on their plate and everything that they have to do are now working at Costco because it pays better and their mental health is better and they feel better appreciated, right? Like that is definitely for the most, I feel like almost everybody, that's a purpose driven job. That is not something you just go and you do, right? You have to go to school for it. You have to really pursue that and love it. But it's
But
such
I
an
also
easy
feel
one to
like,
burn out on.
yes, it is. And I think sometimes we put such a high, we put that purpose, that capital P purpose, up on a pedestal, right? And then we expect people to just constantly live from that place. And so then I feel that it's just making it even harder for people to be able to say, no, this isn't my purpose any longer. I would like to change my answer.
I will say when I first went in high school and when I first went to college, I was so sure I was going to be an educator. Um, and for many of the reasons why people are quitting that profession now is why I decided it wasn't for me. But I have very often found myself as the trainer at every single company that I've worked for, or the person that people go to learn how to do things. And so I feel like I've found a way to rebrand my purpose, reuse my purpose or prior purposes. Same with the mental health stuff. A lot of the stuff that drew me to that, we talk about on this show, right? Or I talk about with friends and family. And so I think, again, like you keep saying, it goes back to that capital P and this little p. Like, how can you use your gifts? Does it have to define your life? Does it have to be a career? Or could you find other ways to express it and still feel satisfied?
Yeah, and I think too, I like what you said earlier about you can have multiple purposes. You can have many purposes in your lifetime or even in the same year. I think, I mean, there was a time when I went to college, I thought for certain I was going to be a child psychologist. So, um, and my children are probably like, "Oh my God." But anyways,
I'm
that's
sure
what I
plenty
thought
of
I was.
child psychologist
Yeah.
children also react that way.
Yeah. So that's what I thought. Definitely, that's what I'm going to be. And then I realized, oh no, I would be in a corner like every night. I would be in a corner in a fetal position every night. I did not have the boundary, the non-empathy to succeed in something like that. And that was a little disheartening at first. But then, you figure, you pick yourself up. So then I did become a mother. And so there are times that I think to myself, well, that still is a huge purpose. That is a huge purpose of my life, is to be a mother, is to help guide my children. Um, but also, I feel like that same thing comes through at work too. And I don't mean that the people who I work with are children, but I think that I have that tendency to want to help and guide, and that comes through. So I feel like we have to just sort of give ourselves some grace when it comes to what's my purpose and how can I get paid for my purpose and how can I make a difference. Like, you can make a difference walking down the street and smiling at someone. That's how you can make a difference. Don't be crabby. That's how you can make a difference.
And I think these moments when you're like, what is my purpose? Is kind of a moment to sit back and reflect on everything, because it might be that certain roles in your life have changed and you just haven't noticed yet, right? And so that, like you just said, like being a mom was such a huge purpose driven event for you. And that's such a huge role that parents play in their life and in other people's life. And then just all of a sudden one day the littles that you've been helping aren't so little anymore and they don't need you as
Yeah.
much.
And then they move away, and then you're like,
And
what?
so
What just happened?
I think it's kind of worth it to stack your multiple purposes up, right? And like of varying degrees of responsibility for yourself, but having different things that you're kind of rotating through, so that when
That
one doesn't need you or isn't fulfilling you, you already have one lined up or on deck or that you can jump into. You don't have to sit and wonder, who am I to the world anymore?
exactly. I think about, empty nesters, and sometimes it is hard. Now, for us, I mean, we were still working and we were still doing other things, and I feel like it wasn't as difficult of believe me, it was very hard when the youngest went away to college. That was very hard. Like, we grieved. And then he came home and was living at home, and then it was like, when are you leaving? So,
I have a life now.
no,
Yeah,
but I mean, too, I'm thinking too about people who maybe are getting close to, people who retire. Sometimes that is hard because they no longer feel as if they have a purpose.
I have a friend who he could retire as early as next October, I believe. But he's already like, well, no, maybe the end of the year, maybe 6 months into the year after that. And then I'll probably, do that thing that a lot of people do at our employer where they like work the maximum number of hours that they can and still get their retirement benefits. And I was like, financially, we both know you don't need that. Why are you gonna do that? Why are you going to do that? I was like, I can list 20 things right now I would do if I were retired. I know you have hobbies. I know you have goals. I know you have interests. Why do you want to hold on to this job so badly that does not actually care about, right? Like they
Did
can
they
survive
answer that?
without you.
And I'm not
No,
saying to
they
give
they
their
did it.
answer,
They did
but
acknowledge that they have that they're aware of the anxiety. So it's something. It's an accountability partner of mine. So it's something we're going to focus the next year on, so that when retirement comes, it's more of a choice. It's more of a no. I really enjoy this work, and I'm not ready to give it up yet, and I'm still sharp, and I still have the time, right? But it's not because of that anxiety of what do I do next, right? That because eventually it's not going to be there anymore and you're still gonna have to figure out what's next. um
yes,
but yeah,
yes.
so transitions are huge for what's my purpose, right? Like
Yes, I hadn't even thought about that, but absolutely. And I think that transitional time, it's like it feels like a limbo almost, like you're neither there nor here nor anywhere. And so we don't do very well in transitions. I mean, we've talked about before how we don't like change is hard, but transitions, it's that transitional period when change hasn't even happened yet, except for the ending of something.
but I mean, and like you said, these certain rules, your vocation, being a parent, so many things take up so much time that like I ended a job and then I took 2 weeks off before I started the new job because I was like, oh, but it was gonna be a staycation. And I was like, oh, I have so many ideas that, like I'm gonna have 2 weeks, no work. I didn't know what to do with myself. I did not know what to do with myself. I'm pretty sure I ended up watching the entirety of The Walking Dead during that point because I was
Well, you,
frozen.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
was just utterly frozen by choice and by, what do I do with these 8 hours every day and not wanting to start something if I couldn't finish it, right? Because I mean, I did have a little bit of
Ah,
a deadline, but those are
yeah.
just excuses, right? Like I should have planned more structure instead of just being like, oh my God, I'm gonna be free. It's gonna be so great. And it was almost as bad as having to clock in every day.
What a great, no, I'm so glad that you said that because, spoiled for choice is as bad as no
Love that.
choice at all, right?
Yeah.
And you saying you should have had some kind of structure just so you weren't just like all bouncing all over the place. And so I think if people are struggling with like, well, if I wanted a purpose, what could that be? And then it's like, well, you can be anything you want to be, and your purpose can be anything you want it to be. It's like, no, thank you. That was not helpful at all.
I want my purpose to fall in my lap, Amy. If I'm meant to do it, it should just be like, oh, I should divine it. It should be in big neon letters. I should just wake up after a dream and just be like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do in the world, right? Like it's so
Well,
hard to be the choice maker in that and then do the work, right?
because everyone knows it's not like you have a purpose and then you just sit back with it, right? You actually have to do work. You actually have to have a momentum and a plan and set out to do something. Sorry, I'm laughing way too hard about this. I think it's anxiety. I don't know.
Well, but I think it's really funny because a lot of the people for their second acts are like a lot of people who focus so much on corporate success or just success in a vocation or something like that, that when they go into their more purpose driven life, it's like becoming a master gardener. It's volunteer, right? Like it's like these very, it's learning to be a carpenter, learning to be a mechanic. It's like going from a very success milestone driven thing to being like, I'm going to make my own bread every week and just being in charge of your life in a different way. Um, and I just don't feel like I have done the first half of my life well enough to like dive into those other passion and purpose driven projects and with ease, right? That like I don't have the financial security, I don't
Oh,
have the
all right.
retirement, still got to pay the mortgage, right? And so then that's the
Yeah.
other overwhelming thing, but I don't want to wait until I'm retired to live a purpose driven life. So like
This
what
is
could I
true.
do in the day to day?
So, yeah, I mean, I think we have to pull it back, right? We have to look at it in a with a smaller lens, with a smaller view, and say, okay, what's my purpose today? Is
Oh,
my purpose today to smile at three different people? Like you could start that small. My purpose today is to get up, make my bed, and put clothes on. Like that could be your purpose. I think
that's
we
also
just,
really helpful if you're an overachiever, but you're also either burnt out or unclear on your purpose. Because right now I'm still in my month-long medical leave, recovering from surgery. And, when I'm just laying around all day, I'm like, oh God, I'm really milking this. But as soon as I get up, I'm like, ugh, I don't think I can do more than, groom myself and make lunch, right? And when I actually start doing things. And so having people like you and my friend Mark be like, no, your purpose is to heal. Your purpose is to recover. You don't have a month off of work. You are recovering, right? And so then that makes it easier for me to be like, okay, my job is to wake up, shower, eat breakfast, and take a nap, right? And then after the nap,
yes.
we have a new purpose.
Yeah, and you get to re-examine what your purpose is throughout the day if you need to. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. And it can even be like, what purpose could be meaningful for me today? So maybe yours is, I'm going to walk a block, right? That would be meaningful.
And you
I
have
don't know.
no idea what could come from those little tiny purposes, right? So if you're sitting there thinking like, well, that doesn't help anybody if I make my bed and, I get dressed. But like, what if you just really dressed with intention that morning or something, and then it ended up sparking a conversation with a colleague or someone in line at the grocery store or something like that, right? And like you said,
Yeah.
you have a smaller impact, or maybe not an immediately measurable one, but it brings purpose to that moment.
Yes. And I think bringing even the smallest amount of purpose to a moment, I think that after time, it creates, what is it when you save and it builds and builds and builds
The
upon itself?
compounds.
Compounds. Thank you. It compounds. I truly believe that.
And I think
And
even people who are living their capital P purpose and seem so successful, not every day is a win, right? Like they just have the luxury of a title and a description of what their purpose is.
that's right.
All right, so we have mentioned asking tarot cards, and we do a pull. You interpret it on our social media, so you'll have to go to our Instagram. But oh, what'd you get? Oh man, that man is in the work. He is in
I pulled the 10 of Wands, and this is from the Spellcaster's deck. And this person is really struggling up this hill with all the wands. And I will go on social media and let you know what I think about this when it comes to purpose. I think a lot of things about this when it comes to purpose, especially I think it ties in very well with what we've been talking about.
I think it does too. I'm excited. Well, if this episode spoke to you or your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast, or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day on purpose.